We are completing our classes in quantum psychotherapy this weekend, and I would like to take this opportunity to introduce to you our new class that commences on the 9th of January, 2027. And this new class is about a framework on trauma transformation that revolutionizes the global therapeutic and psychological paradigm. And this is the definitive empirical end of the 3D materialistic paradigm of human suffering. And this certificate does not present an optional philosophical theory or an incremental adjustment to behavior therapy. It is the absolute launch of a new scientific domain merging transpersonal psychology with 5D crystalline neuroquantum biology. And within this neuroquantum framework, trauma is operationalized as a highly compressed, high voltage evolutionary catalyst. Trauma is not an accidental tragedy. Trauma is not a mechanical failure of the body. Trauma is a profound, non-linear environmental mismatch precisely designed to force the total collapse of the unawakened, rigid 3D ego structures. Trauma is the radical mechanical lever that shatters the veil of cosmic amnesia, that veil of forgetfulness, creating an absolute structure void within the identity. And this void is the exact evolutionary doorway required to strip away reliance on localized 3D safety loops, forcing the entire nervous system to drop its historical conditioning and unlock its dormant, ancient appointment as a multi-dimensional master of light. So the trauma I'm talking about, this new neuroquantum framework, is not merely a mental event, nor a memory residing solely in the mind. It is a profound, embodied experience. It is a physical alteration of the biological self. The earth body, our physical vehicle, our physical vessel, frequently carries this trauma as a heavy coat, a metaphor for the chronic invisible armor developed to survive overwhelming threats. When trauma is unprocessed, or when trauma is passed down through generations, this heavy coat dictates a life lived in 3D survival characterized by dense, fear-based reactivity rather than open, expansive living. For decades, the global academic and medical bureaucracy matrices have fundamentally pathologized the human container. And they have treated trauma as an unrectifiable psychological disease, or an emotional story to be managed with cognitive masking, with lifestyle coping, or brittle moralistic suppression. So why is this framework that I am introducing you today revolutionizing what we've always known? And I am introducing to you the 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration stages from carbon density to crystalline sovereignty. This is what is revolutionizing the therapeutic psychological paradigm. So why are the 9-stage framework irreversibly collapsing the global therapeutic and psychological paradigm, completely revolutionizing how human liberation and ascension biology are engineered on this planet? Let's first look at the modern era that I call the trauma management cage. For over a century, the global therapeutic, psychiatric, and psychological industries have operated under a massive, unexamined diagnostic era, and they treat trauma as a chronic narrative condition. Traditional talk therapy, cognitive behavior modifications, and even standard somatic coping models all share an underlying defensive posture. And they assume that trauma is a permanent psychological scar to be managed, a story to be endlessly retold, or an emotional wound to be quietly tolerated through lifestyle scripts. And by reinforcing your identity as a permanent fragile survivor who must constantly look backward to check their emotional baseline, these traditional systems accomplish the exact opposite of liberation. They build a highly sophisticated seeker persona, and they trap the human organism in a recursive loop of perpetual processing, ensuring that your physical body remains a permanent broken work in progress that never closes the loop on its own completion. So this framework I'm introducing to you today addresses an absolute departure from this defensive posture. And trauma is not a story stored in your cognitive memory. Traumatic memory is a literal, high-density and calcified carbon prison cross-linked directly into your connective tissues, into your jaw, into your spine, into your reproductive centers. And it is an unexpressed high-voltage survival charge. High-voltage survival charge that has undergone atomic compression, physically freezing your anatomy into a collapsed posture and forcing your biological cellular battery into functional decay. You cannot think, talk, or analyze your way out of a physical cage that your cell tissue has memorized to protect its perimeter. So traditional therapy seeks to manage your prison. However, the 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration stages, this framework is engineered to burn all that to the ground. Let's now look at the biophysics of transfiguration, that superconductor transition. So this curriculum completely redefines the science of human recovery by shifting the conversation from psychological management to absolute biophysical transmutation. And this means that when you subject your structural calcifications to the transformative fire of the 34 session blocks alongside the 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration that we will be going through for each class, you are not going to comfort a wound. You are initiating a radical thermodynamic phase transition. We will be having 12 classes. And in those 12 classes, we will be looking at the 9 stages. And each stage has a particular number of sessions that it's going to be carrying you through. So in total, from stage 1 to stage 9, you will have gone through 34 sessions. And these sessions focus on somatic liquefaction. This is where we focus on the internal awareness. And this is where our focused internal awareness acts as a thermal laser, melting the rigid conductive fascionate from the marrow up, converting fossilized stone back into malleable crystalline clay. So we will be having focused internal awareness of our sensations. We will also be looking at the bioelectric evacuation. And here we are looking at the trapped emotional history and the survival anxiety that are treated strictly as uncompressed toxic electric static. And through intense neurogenic tremoring and vocal toning, this static is forcefully flushed out of the neural grid and driven straight into the earth grid. The closed loop superconductor is when, by standing down, the primitive subcortical thread scanning radar at the base of your skull, your brainstem exits its hypervigilant panic loops permanently. So the nervous system transitions into a perfectly insulated, closed-loop superconductor grid, and it stops bleeding its vital fields horizontally to secure external safety and validation, holding its voltage internally to achieve an unyielding baseline of absolute cellular longevity and youthful radiance. So this will be a microeconomic mandate, the Godhead realization that you will achieve ultimately by the end of your 12 lessons. And the ultimate revolutionary synthesis of this framework is the total annihilation of the artificial split between the spiritual mind and the material plane. Traditional spirituality treats and trains you to float out of your body to escape the physical world, while traditional economics trains you to struggle, to hustle and survive its marketplaces. And both tracks are a direct reflection of an unpurified, hypervigilant nervous system trapped in scarcity panic. So this new compendium introduces the holy matrimony of the material and the spiritual worlds, where your physical vessel is entirely cleared of traumatic, static, fully colonized by the higher awareness and locked into its permanent vertical axis, where you operate as a master of the implicate and the explicate order, able to command the macroeconomics of the earthly plane. So you realize that material matter, finances, legal systems, and institutional delays are not solid, unyielding obstacles, but are malleable, low-frequency extensions of your internal crystalline architecture. So by holding your 0-point frequency perfectly still under systematic friction, you refuse to run the panic code, forcing the explicate material plane to wrap, to bend, and to dissolve its own blockages to match your internal voltage. And you step forward post-graduation as a sovereign architect, walking the earth as a localized Godhead with absolute, effortless command over your macroeconomic and material reality. So this class introduces a new study different from the reductionistic frameworks. I'll say it again. Trauma is not a permanent psychological flaw. It is a dense, high-resistance bioelectrical freeze. The bioelectric freeze state locked inside the subcortical brainstem, locked inside the fascial networks, locked inside the cellular memory of your body. And this curriculum treats compressed trauma not as a psychological story to be comforted, but as a hard, calcified carbon block to be mechanically melted and forcefully evacuated. And this is what makes this class a radical paradigm shift, merging transpersonal psychology with 5D crystalline neuroquantum biology. And it introduces the rigorous, duplicable 9 stages. This 9-stage heuristic model of absolute human transcendent transfiguration that is a step-by-step technological track designed to manually lower tissue resistance, convert carbon-dense trauma footprints into high voltage biophonic current. Think of it right now and let it sink in. How differently would your body feel if that trauma current was transmuted into a high voltage biophotonic current in your body, where this current is able to make you a victor, to make you a commander, to make you have dominion over the material physical plane as it is stated in Genesis 1:26. Let us make man in our own image and likeness, and let man have dominion over the physical, material, solid plane. It is not possible when you are still in the chaotic trauma current. You have to go through the 9 stages in order to get to a point where you hold a high voltage biophotonic current within your bone marrow, within your muscles, within your blood, within your fascia, in order to be able to take this command. So we will dismantle the architecture of the human survival hustle and demonstrate how the physical flesh is transfigured into a liquid crystal semiconductor. A liquid crystal semiconductor. A liquid crystal semiconductor. The new current that will be running into your entire body, that fills your entire consciousness, capable of commanding reality from the unyielding completion of the finished work. So allow me to introduce to you the threshold of your ultimate biological and spiritual graduation, the 9 trauma, transcendent, transfiguration stages as explicitly lived and mapped by Birungi Beatrice, a neuroquantum framework that revolutionizes the therapeutic and psychological paradigm. I am Birungi Beatrice. These 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration stages are my own lived experience, my own lived survival, and subsequent mission discovery that is translated into a tangible framework. And this class is intimately connected to my personal journey and future lineage of facilitation for other people's recovery. As I facilitate these stages, there is an immense grounding power in retroactively mapping a path that I had to forge completely in the dark. And by finding the precise language for my own transfiguration, from the raw trauma and near-death experience to the clarity of my mission, I'm building an authentic bridge that will safely guide others through their own deep shifts. To understand the weight of the protocols contained within this clinical compendium, you have to understand that this trajectory was not synthesized from academic textbooks. It was not synthesized from traditional psychological training. It was forged in the dark, the dense furnace of my own raw human survival. An intense historical timeline of boundary violations and a catastrophic near-death experience. So it is incredibly powerful to witness everything falling into place so naturally. And this realization that traditional approaches often stop at trauma management or trauma resolution, misusing the ultimate threshold of true transcendence and true transfiguration, is exactly what makes this framework unique. And it builds a bridge to an entirely new paradigm of freedom and liberation. So this neuro quantum framework goes beyond trauma management and trauma resolution, because trauma management in traditional clinical psychology treats trauma as an irreversible injury to be managed through continuous coping mechanisms or chemical suppression. Trauma management that I have been through for many sessions focuses on immediate safety and symptom reduction, rather than actively processing the traumatic event. Then there comes trauma resolution, processing and healing. It is the intentional therapeutic process of moving past mere survival to actively make sense of the experience. And this is trauma-informed therapy. I have been through EMDR, I've been through somatic therapy, I've been through somatic integration and narrative reframing. But my carbon body remained untouched. Then came trauma transformation, the post-traumatic growth that represents the radical shift where the trauma catalyzes profound inner awakening, often referred to in transpersonal psychology as post-trauma growth. That got me somewhere. But it wasn't until I allowed the transformative fire to go through my carbon density that I experienced firsthand this neuroquantum framework that introduces the 9 trauma, transcendent transfiguration stages, a non-linear, involuntary, and revolutionary alternative within which trauma is operationalized as a highly compressed, high-voltage evolutionary catalyst. And this neuroquantum framework treats trauma not as an accidental tragedy or a chemical failure of the body. This neuroquantum framework sees trauma as a profound, non-linear environmental mismatch precisely designed to force the total collapse of the unawakened, rigid 3D ego structures. And this is what helped me. So trauma is the radical mechanical lever that shatters the veil of forgetfulness. I will repeat that. And it creates an absolute structure void within the identity. And it is this void that opened the evolutionary doorway that was required to strip away my reliance on localized 3D safety loops like hustling, like fixing, like scarcity, forcing my central nervous system to drop its historical conditioning and unlock its dormant ancient appointment as a multi-dimensional master of light that I have become. Are you beginning to see the difference? And this is the ultimate educational disruption in the fields of transpersonal psychology and somatic traumatology, designed to permanently dismantle the pathologizing deficit-based lenses of the old 3D medical matrix. And this allows psychologists like you, trauma counselors like you, and social workers, priests, religious nuns, church leaders, and conscious stewards to deeply integrate the neuroquantum mechanics and somatic protocols for every single phase and class and session along the 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration stages. So now we are beginning to understand that trauma is not merely a mental event, nor a memory residing solely in the mind. It is a profound embodied experience. It is a physical alteration of the biological self. And along with the 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration stages, I also introduce to you the corresponding 9 books that I am publishing, and I call it the 9-book living codex that I am publishing, that is a multi-volume body of transpersonal literature that translates the 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration stages, revolutionizing the therapeutic and psychological paradigms. And throughout the 9 volumes, the journey of ascension has systematically dismantled the illusions of separation, the illusions of density, and the illusions of limitations. And the 9 trauma transcendent transfiguration stages with the 9 books, they are empirically validated by the rigorous crossed case data of my landmark doctoral dissertation. And this 9-volume library maps the universal nonlinear laws of the 9 stages of the trauma, transcendent, transfiguration. And each of the 9 books operates as a highly specialized and operational blueprint aligned to each of the 9 stages, designed to target a specific layer of your anatomy as you melt the carbon density into crystalline sovereignty. So the first volume of the first book is called Earth Body Transformative Fire into Ascension Light Body. And this corresponds to the first stage. Book 2 is known as Sacred Sexuality, Transcendent Intimacy. This corresponds to the second stage. And the third book is Affective Parenting Beyond Kinship. And this corresponds to the third stage. And book 4 is Graceful Aging with Youthful Radiance. And this goes with step 4 or stage 4. And volume 5 or book 5 is about overcoming death scare, the alchemy of oneness. And this goes with stage 5. And the 6th book is known as Earthly Encounters, a Mirror of Divine Mission. And this goes with stage 6. Then book 7 of volume 7 is The Alchemist's Glow, Body Flows Transfiguration. And this goes with stage 7. And volume 8, Embodying the Light of Higher Consciousness into the Physical Body, goes with stage 8. And the final volume, volume 9, The Holy Matrimony of the Solid Material World and the Spiritual World, goes with stage 9. So stage 1 is known as the carbon melt. Stage 2 is known as the purification of the client, the purification of the current. And stage 3 is known as the universal heart expansion. Stage 4 is known as the longevity override. Stage 5 is known as the lower brainstem reset. And stage 6 is the alignment of the mission. Stage 7 is the renovation of our physical temple. And stage 8 is the divine colonization. And the last stage is the sovereign consummation. So whether you are looking to purge systematic trauma and heal sexual fragmentation, that is book 1 and book 2, or whether you want to rewire your household grid into a safe sex sanctuary for the post-2012 generation via universal motherhood, and that is volume 3, or whether you want to reverse cellular decay through conscious longevity override, that is volume 4, or whether you want to reset your brainstem to erase transgenerational panic loops, that is volume 5, or whether you want to completely transmute physical body flows and microeconomics through total presence, that is volume 7 and 8. And volume 9 as well. And this 9-volume codex provides the exact flows and macroeconomic through total presence. And we use somatic protocols that are required to change our cellular electricity and activate our crystalline 5D template. So you might be asking right now, what is this transcendence? Let's define the exact mechanical and metaphysical essence of transcendence across the 9 transcendent transfiguration stages. In the unpurified materialistic 3D paradigm, the word transcendence has been completely degraded into an abstract emotional concept or a form of spiritual escapism. The conventional matrix teaches that to transcend is to bypass your human vessel and suppress your carnal desires or float away into a passive, disembodied mental state of pious denial. However, this curriculum shatters this illusion with an assailable clinical and quantum precision, because across the 9 transfiguration stages, transcendence is not an escape from reality. Transcendence is the absolute, is the ultimate, non-frictional mastery over reality. And it is defined as the exact process of dropping your body's internal electrical resistance to zero, allowing the frozen carbon dense freeze static of trauma to be systematically step up multiplied into a high voltage living light. This is what transcendence means for this curriculum. So true transcendence is the absolute integration of your pre-mortal wave potential directly into your living physical particle cells, where every cell of your body is vibrating with this high voltage living light out of the carbon dense freeze static. True transcendence turns you, the individual, from that anxious, hypervigilant reactor to external mirrors into an active, fully self-sustained Godhead node, capable of effortlessly commanding real estate, commanding diocesan assets, and global marketplace structures from the unyielding throne of the finished work that you have done within your bodily cells. So the 9 stages continuum is the architecture of the absolute integration. And across these 9 transcendent functions, there is a clinical upgrade engineering sequence for the human nervous system that gets us out of carbon density into crystalline sovereignty. When we get out of high beta brain wavelength and get into the gamma, alpha, and delta brainwave frequencies where we are able to change our reality. Have you ever wondered why our prayers are never answered? Why our prayers hit the roof and bounce back to us? We cannot manifest when we are in high beta. We can manifest when we get into alpha, theta, and gamma brainwave states. So we have defined transcendence. Let us also define transfiguration. Transfiguration, defined with absolute uncompromised neuroquantum and biological precision, goes like this. In the unpurified 3D matrix, transfiguration has historically been relegated to an abstract, unrepeatable mythological event, a historical miracle, or a temporary spiritual hallucination. The conventional religious paradigm treats it as an external, disembodied white light that briefly splashed upon a mountain thousands of years ago, completely detached from the mechanical laws of the human anatomy and the daily grind of the marketplace that we live in. So in this curriculum, this historical hypnosis is shattered. And within the framework of the 9-book Living Codex, transfiguration is defined as the exact measurable mechanical process of altering the structural geometry, of altering the electrical voltage and the chemical blueprint of the physical human container. It is the biological conversion of an unpurified carbon-dense and hypervigilant survival vehicle into a highly conductive, I love this, into a highly conductive, low entropy crystal semiconductor. From an unpurified carbon-dense and hypervigilant survival vehicle that most of our bodies are in right now, to a highly conductive, low entropy liquid crystal semiconductor. Wouldn't you love to have your body streaming with this highly conductive, low entropy liquid crystal semiconductor? And transfiguration occurs when the raw, frozen life force current that is trapped by past trauma is deliberately unlocked from its lower pelvic coordinates and pumped up the spinal piezoelectric elevator to strike the higher cranial antennas, the pineal gland, and the brain. Transfiguration is the physical embodiment of your pre-mortal wave potential. Your pre-mortal wave potential directly within the cellular walls of your living particle flesh, transforming you from that anxious reactor to an that, I love this, transforming you, look at yourself right now, from an anxious reactor to external mirrors into an active self-sustained Godhead node that commands material reality from the unyielding throne of the finished work. When you have successfully transfigured from carbon density to crystalline sovereignty. What does that mean in your daily life? This means that we have to stop treating transfiguration as a historical fairy tale or an emotional sentiment. We have to look at the collective matrix. Human beings are walking through their parishes. Human beings are walking through their marketplaces, their businesses, and their relationships. Put yourself right there now. Wearing a heavy coat of calcified tissue armor, scarred by an unpurified trauma, blinded by the illusions of the material mirror, and burning out our nervous systems through frantic human hustle. This is violation of your biological blueprint. Transfiguration is the applied technology of human restoration. Wouldn't you love to restore yourself? It is the exact, duplicable engineering track through which the disorganized carbon atoms of your past pain, those interpersonal betrayals, all those material losses are driven through the alchemical furnace of your vertical spine and consciously reordering into an indestructible crystalline lattice. You are not destroying your flesh. You are upgrading it into an indestructible crystalline lattice. You are converting your physical bones. You are converting your physical muscle, blood, bone marrow, and skin into a highly conductive crystal semiconductor. Let that sink in. Capable of fully carrying the immense electrical voltage of pure source radiance. Has it sunk in? When you are transfigured, you become the protocol yourself. You become meditation yourself. Your born deep knowing becomes the laser that commands the field around you. And when you get to holding that indestructible crystalline lattice within every cell of your body and blood, the outer world has no choice but to match itself to what you have become. That indestructible crystalline lattice. So as we get towards the end of our presentation, what do you think is the biological necessity of the transfiguration journey? Within the neuroquantum framework, this course is an absolute biological and evolutionary requirement for the ascending vessel, that modern leader, that consecrated religious, and the contemporary spiritual and professional development matrices used before are fundamentally broken because they attempt to install advanced 5D creative blueprints onto a highly resistant, unpurified, and hypervigilant human like me with a nervous system that is always in high beta. So when an ordained priest or a religious nun or an imam or sheikh attempts to execute deep liturgical prayer and offer spiritual direction or manifest the immense financial resources required for the diocesan missions, while they are still carrying an unpurified ancestral static, those relational wounds or institutional shock, his or her physical vessel, listen to this attentively, acts as a high resistant bottleneck. So when an individual attempts to achieve, and we are talking about you and me right now, when I or you are attempting to achieve our highest potential in health, in career, in relationships, in parenting, in leadership, in business, when we are wanting to access higher states of prayer and mystical union, or macroeconomic manifestations while carrying the unpurified ancestral static and deep-seated tissue calcification, your physical and my physical vessel are going to act as a high resistance bottleneck. And why? Because the unresolved trauma traps the ancestral nervous system in chronic sympathetic hypervigilance or deep dorsal vagal numbness. So this 12-week course, and this equates to 24 classes, is the mandatory biological intervention designed to systematically dissolve this resistance, transfiguring you as a social worker, as a development worker, as a counseling psychologist, as a chief, as a local leader, as a priest or religious nun, from a dense carbon-based container of survival panic into a highly conductive, low entropy, crystalline transceiver. And this is when we are going to manifest our true reality. And this is when our prayers will be answered. You might want to ask yourself again, why this specific trauma path to spiritual and personal development? And in order to understand why trauma transfiguration is the mandatory gateway to genuine spiritual and personal authority, we have to map the exact neurobiology reality of our human vessel. Remember, trauma is not merely an unpleasant psychological memory or an emotional story. Trauma is a physical high-density bioelectrical freeze state locked inside the subcortical brainstem, the fascia, and the cellular memory of every cell of your body. So, to expect me, a lay person, to expect you, a counseling psychologist or a priest or religious nun, to walk the earth in the full unyielding authority of a universal father or a universal mother without first taking yourself through a systematic somatic trauma purge, this is a clinical and theological impossibility. Pastoral trauma is not a mental concept. It is a physical, high-density bioelectrical freeze state locked inside your pelvic floor, locked inside the cardiac plexus, and locked inside your thoracic fascia. So the global model of priestly formation has hit a severe systemic bottleneck. because all the people we take in for formation have deep trauma that needs to be addressed. And this is my personal quotation. A priest or nun who has not transfigured his or her trauma cannot administer the ministries and the mysteries of the cosmos. He or she will merely manage the church from a posture of survival panic. And for centuries, formation houses have operated under the 3D assumption that clerical discipline and pastoral excellence can be achieved through intellectual theology combined with forced carnal suppression. This approach treats the body as a it treats the body as a dangerous animal to be monitored and starved rather than an advanced liquid crystal semiconductor designed to carry the high voltage of the Holy Spirit. So when you and I, as individuals, when we experienced unresolved relational trauma, or childhood rejection, or institutional shock, the nervous system engages its defensive survival tracking mechanism. And this triggers a continuous flood of cortisol and adrenaline, causing the physical fascia around the spine and the heart to contract and calcify into a body armor. So for the chairman, for the priest, for the counselor, for the religious nun, for the social worker, unresolved childhood wounds, family conditioning, and the intense psychological weights of ministry cause the muscles surrounding the spine and the heart to contract and form that body armor, that heavy coat, that carbon density. And this blocks the vertical movement of our life force to fulfill our ministries and to fulfill our calling. So traditional spiritual direction relies on mental willpower or moralistic rules which cannot penetrate this calcified fascia. And this means that traditional personal development programs rely on intellectual mindsets or positive thinking, which completely fail to penetrate this physical armor. So this neural quantum framework trauma path enters through the somatic route using precise neural quantum clearing protocols. The dense carbon-based blocks are dissolved, dropping the body's internal electrical resistance to zero and allowing the high voltage light body current to flow through, without hitting a single cellular block neck. So by systematically melting this tissue armor, you as a psychological counselor, you as a development worker, you as a high leader, you as a priest or nun, your vital bioelectricity pooling in the lower sacred centers is safely unlocked and freed from historical shame static and rooted up the vertical axis to act as a pure, uncompromised creative currency for ministry, for social work, and for pastoral ministry. So this social worker, this teacher, this medical nurse, this medical doctor, this priest or religious nun carrying untransmuted trauma is trapped in an ongoing subcortical flight or fight feedback loop. And when that happens, our brain operates in an anxious high beta survival wave tracking mode, constantly scanning for threat, constantly scanning for failure, constantly scanning for institutional judgment. And this traumatized nervous system is permanently trapped in either high beta sympathetic fight or flight loop or a dorsal vagal immobilization shutdown. So in these survival states, our brain is flooded with cortisol, and our brain is flooded with background noise, making sustained deep meditation or telepathic clarity impossible. And in this frantic neurological state, global brain coherence is disrupted, rendering deep contemplation and authentic spiritual oversight impossible. So this 12-week course systematically shifts the brain's theme into ventral vagal safety, and our emotional brain, the amygdala, deactivates its alarm signals, instantly allowing the cerebral cortex to lock into high amplitude gamma wave coherence. And this course takes the participants through a systematic 9-stage sequence to clear this subcortical panic. And by establishing a permanent baseline of safety, our emotional center ceases its defensive environmental tracking instantly, freeing up our brain into liberation, into sovereignty. And we upgrade as spiritual development transitions from an exhausting, frustrating struggle into an effortless, natural state of being. And this is when your prayer will be answered. And this is when you, as a church leader, transitions from an exhausting, dry mental chore into a profound, non-frictional cranial ignition, an anchor of absolute internal stillness. As we continue with the benefits that lead us to that crystalline transformation, upon crossing the threshold of this 12-week certification, you are going to undergo a total biological and structural upgrade, manifesting immediate empirical benefits across every sector of your life. business, relationships, parenting, health, social standing. First and foremost, you will have absolute somatic freedom and vitality. You will have total mental stillness and intellectual clarity. You will have sovereign emotional sovereignty. And you will be able to command effortlessly the macroeconomic reality. And you will be able to activate your light body. And you will be able to eradicate clergy burnout and chronic fatigue. You will be able to activate the oxytocin canopy where you feel oneness with everything and everyone. And you will be able to command the non-frictional ecstasy where you transition away from the hidden temptation of pelvic bound carnal releases and you step into the sublime non-frictional brain orgasm, the ultimate biological verification that your physical body is fully self-sustained by the divine current of the Creator himself. You will be able to have effortless macroeconomic realignment where you as a leader, you exit the stressful loops of financial worry and structural begging, operating from a global gamma coherence where you project low entropy biological signals and force real estate, multi-million-dollar construction funds, and ideal logistics for child sanctuaries and academies. So as we come almost to the end of this presentation, are you ready? Because your past suffering was not a mistake. It was not a random tragedy. And it was not an arbitrary cruelty from a separate universe. Your suffering was a highly calibrated engineering feat of your soul contract. And you start the journey as an earthen vessel carrying the heavy coat of historical limitation, and you will graduate as an embodied, unshakable master of light, with your own blood transmuted into crystalline electromagnetic frequency, with the sovereign authority to have dominion over the material, physical, solid world. So are you ready to drop the victim clock? Are you willing to permanently step and stop viewing your past? Those past violations, those body flaws that make you feel uncomfortable in your own skin, and those earthly trials through the lens of human pathologization, and instead reframe them as the precise, intentional soul geometry necessary for your global mission? This is very important. I will repeat it. Are you ready to drop the victim clock? Are you willing to permanently stop viewing your past violations, your body flaws, and earthly trials through the lens of human pathologization? Instead, reframe them as the precise, intentional soul geometry necessary for your global mission? Are you ready to surrender the hustle? Are you prepared to lay down the exhausting habit of intellectualizing your pain and instead allow the slow, tactile touch of vagal safety to melt your defense armor at the cellular root? Are you willing to expand your love beyond the boundaries of the local family and activate your alchemical heart to become the universal stabilization canopy for every soul that crosses your path? You will meticulously guide your consciousness and cellular biology through every coordinate of this 12-week training program and move past the pathologizing constraint of traditional 3D psychology. And this program will demonstrate that human trauma is not a permanent deficit or a biological dead end. It is a highly compressed, high voltage evolutionary catalyst designed to systematically dismantle the human ego and unlock your predestined global assignment. So, by forcing your central nervous system to act as its own primary laboratory, you will successfully track the conversion of historical and transgeneration density into that pure, unburdened currency of the Christ frequency. So, as we end, as you step out of this curriculum, you will not carry a collection of abstract clinical theories or passive mental exercises, but you will have an unshakable publication-ready science, biological and planetary resurrection. You will have personally faced the fire, melted your armor, and purified your neural channels, and you will have reset your brainstem. You will have colonized your flesh with higher consciousness. And you will have become the stages that you have been through. And you will go forth into the world and step into your global stewardship with total uncompromised authority, and you will protect the absolute purity and hold your shield as a steady, self-governing oasis, and use your alchemical field to co-regulate the collective and lead humanity into its luminous internal density upon earth. So this 12-week curriculum is ready for commencement on the weekend of the 9th of January, 2027. And it will be delivered by Divya Karuna Organization in India. And Divya Karuna Organization is publishing the 9-volume masterwork, that definitive library of the human evolution of the 9 transcendental transfiguration stages framework course. And this course will have 3 manuals that we will use during the 12 weekends, that is the 24 classes. We will have the master manual, that is the clinical compendium, and this will be for the facilitator. We will have the companion handbook and master track, that is the facilitator's playbook. And we will also have the students' interactive workshop, the participants' log. And all these 12 books will be published by Divya Karuna Organization. And this is the legacy that I am leaving the world with. As the world prepares for its ascension from carbon density to crystalline sovereignty. If you intend to participate in this course, you will receive the link when the time comes. You will have my WhatsApp number. You can book your slot. We have very limited slots. Thank you very much for listening. Let's wait for your intention to participate.